at some point you've got to back up your threats with action. And when the bully in the school playground continually slaps you about the head, eventually there's retaliation, and that's what's happened now. Now, I suspect the US and the UK will hope that this will be enough to deter the Houthis from further action. But I've got a funny feeling that that is not going to be the case, and that we're going to see more of this over the coming days and perhaps weeks until hopefully the situation settles down.
Now, a significant development overnight. Explosions were heard across Yemen as British and US forces launched strikes on Houthi targets. It's after the Iranian-backed group, the Houthis, repeatedly ignored warnings to stop attacking ships in the Red Sea. The Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, earlier this week had said, actions likely, saying enough is enough, this cannot continue, and we won't allow it to, so watch this space. Well, we now understand what's happened. Let's look at why they've taken this action and its impact. Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, former British Army officer and defence expert, is here. Stuart, good morning.
Good morning, Rosie, and Happy New Year, as we say up in Edinburgh.
Yeah. Significant developments overnight. Just sort of sum up for us, if you can, what action the US and the UK have taken and why.
Indeed. Not unexpected, although I was mildly surprised this morning when I turned on the headlines. But clearly the actions of the Houthi rebels in threatening shipping in the Red Sea was an unsustainable threat from Western perceptions and from world trade perceptions. And many warnings were given, and inevitably, in the end, action has been taken. And it's obviously a US-led action using aircraft from their aircraft carriers and airfields. And the RAF have flown 4 Typhoon sorties from the base at Akrotiri in Cyprus to strike Houthi targets in Yemen. Now, I don't have access to a precise list of those targets, but we can probably guess that they were against the missile launching facilities, logistic facilities and base camps in Yemen used by the Houthi rebels. So the ante has been upped, if I can put it that way, and we wait with bated breath to see what the response from the Houthis might be.
The question is, and I guess the debate has been, if we don't act, are you emboldening the Houthi rebels, Iran, by what would be perceived as kind of Western weakness? So what action do you take instead? They've clearly decided that these targeted strikes would be the right approach. How do you think the Houthis are going to respond?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, and the answer is I don't know how they'll respond. I don't think they'll just say, well, oh, thank you very much. We'll stop doing what we've been doing because of the airstrikes. And I would anticipate that there will be more airstrikes. Certainly there will if the Houthis continue with their actions, launching missiles and small attack boats at civilian shipping and military shipping in the Red Sea. The elephant in the room, of course, as you pointed out, is Iran. Iran has a finger in every pie, or every pie where there is conflict in the Middle East and beyond at the moment. And so in many ways, this is a proxy war by the West against part of the Iranian system. And we'll just have to see how that develops. But I've said before, and I still believe it, at some point, the US and its allies is going to have to deal with Iran one way or t'other. Hopefully that will be by diplomatic means, but you never know. But nobody wants a major war in the Middle East.
Of course, and no one wants this to escalate. But I feel like the UK and the US felt it had got to the point where they felt they had to act. I mean, there's only so many times the Defence Secretary can issue verbal warnings, without doing anything.
Yeah, no, absolutely right, because otherwise you're crying wolf. And at some point you've got to back up your threats with action. And when the bully in the school playground continually slaps you about the head, eventually there's retaliation, and that's what's happened now. Now, I suspect the US and the UK will hope that this will be enough to deter the Houthis from further action. But I've got a funny feeling that that is not going to be the case, and that we're going to see more of this over the coming days and perhaps weeks until hopefully the situation settles down.
When you say more of this, presumably more attacks by the Houthis and then potentially further action from us again?
Oh, yes. I mean, I think if the Houthis continue attacking shipping, then there's no doubt that the US and the UK and allies who are involved will carry out more strikes. At the moment, the strikes have been by cruise missiles and aircraft using precision-guided bombs. But who knows where else that might go? But I think if the Houthis continue, then we'll definitely see more strikes against them.
Yeah, as Rishi Sunak told the president of Egypt, who's obviously a key ally of ours in the region, that Britain would continue to take action to defend freedom of navigation and protect lives at sea. A lot of this is about freedom of navigation. It's about 12% of the world's maritime traffic that uses the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. Do you think these strikes will have achieved one objective, which is say we're going to reassure people using those shipping lanes that they can do so safely? Presumably not yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that, not yet. I think that world shipping companies will be looking at this and saying, all right, well, action has been taken here. It may be that we can return to you using the Suez Canal and the Red Sea and not have to go around the Horn of Africa, which adds, something like 9 hours to the trip and many more pounds and dollars to the cost of taking goods
Good. And then, and
from
then the,
one.
the consumer pays for that ultimately. Yeah.
Well, the consumer pays for it ultimately, and I think we are already seeing some of the supermarkets saying that food prices are going to go up because of the disruption to traffic through the Suez Canal, et cetera, et cetera. And at the moment, certainly domestically, that's absolutely the last thing that we want to see because people are struggling enough as it is. So I think that the shipping companies will be reassured that something's being done, but I don't think they'll be reassured to the point where they're going to start using the Suez Canal and the Red Sea again just yet.
Yeah, of course. Final thing is, I guess the wider concern is that Britain ends up getting dragged into sort of a regional war with Iranian proxies, Iran itself. Is that a concern that you share?
Well, I think it's a concern. I don't think it's an immediate concern because I don't think that Iran particularly wants to take on the might of the USA
Mm.
because it will lose. But of course, the USA doesn't want to take on Iran either because it's got enough conflict on its hands at the moment. So there's a certain amount of tightrope walking, if I could put it that way, by the Iranians. And I think that they will draw back from this sort of, or supporting this sort of thing, if they have any inkling that they're going to be targeted or attacked directly by the US and its allies, because that will be absolutely the last thing that they want.
Thank you so much for your time and your analysis, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, former British Army officer, defence expert, giving his perspective